Welcome to Acteon Energy, Acteon's podcast where offshore expertise and innovation meets global energy insight. Hosted by a range of voices from across our global teams, we dive into the data, engineering knowledge and operational expertise driving smarter, safer and more sustainable energy solutions. We act across the full project lifecycle and we're here to unpack the ideas shaping the future of offshore energy. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm from Acteon. I'm Vice President Commercial, and my name's Tim Eyles.
Good morning. I am from Acteon's Geo-services business line. I'm the Head of Sales and Commercial for the EA region, and my name's Christopher Hillier.
Hi, I work for Acteon's Geo-services business line. I'm the digital lead, and I am Greg Hammond.
So thanks, gentlemen, for talking to us today. So the subject is AI in Geo-services, a geophysical and geotechnical survey. I guess we've been using AI in probably our everyday lives already in sort of ChatGPT to search the internet for sort of concise answers, and then maybe Copilot in the Office 365 applications to help us just use Excel and Word and these other applications. But I guess what's your thoughts on how we could potentially use AI more specifically in our Geo-services work, everyday work? Have you got any thoughts or seen anybody or got some ideas of how that might work, Greg?
Yeah, Tim, I think it's a really interesting subject matter. It's obviously the technology that everybody's speaking about at the moment. It's clearly aimed at making our lives easier, and there are definitely applications that we could use it for within our industry. I think helping to formalize procedures and the way that we go about our work. I think using the large language models, I think really does help to try to find and troubleshoot problems while we're offshore and coordinating with our teams.
So that's to save going through manual documentation or trying to navigate an existing document library.
Very much
so. Bring that data to the fingertips of the guys, is that right?
I think so, and I think feeding that information into that model in such a way that you're putting your own procedures, your own approaches to doing the work and lessons learned that we found from previously.
Oh, yeah.
I think that is a really excellent way of trying to empower the individuals who are offshore in that environment to try to get answers quickly from that point of view and train that engine and continually build that engine. And I think that's a really positive application for the technology.
Okay, and that could be applied to some other parts of the business, other areas as well, not just the geosciences, geophysical, geotechnical, but other areas of the business as well.
I think so. I think there's a lot of people now looking at ways that they can extract information using AI, and that could be just documentation, for example. They need to find certain documentation that corresponds to a piece of equipment for maintenance, for example, and you need to tag all of those different documents. How do you search through those documents that don't have any intelligence to obviously do the tagging? And I think AI going through and scraping that data, I think, is another very interesting application of the technology that I'm seeing, being used more widely.
Greg, I think you make an interesting point. I think it's about empowering people, especially our people offshore, to be supported and to use AI. Not necessarily that we will, jobs will be replaced by AI, but it's a tool to maximise economic value to our customers.
Yeah,
I think a good target is anything that's repetitive. Where somebody's having to do the same thing over again, they're not adding a lot of value each time.
Exactly.
And then if you can move people from those type of jobs into something where they're really using their domain knowledge, then that's got to be better. So keeping human in the loop, but using them in the right place and avoiding those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I guess some of the other things I've seen a little bit of work on so far is also taking things like video footage from remotely operated vehicles underwater, where they're scanning, for example, or looking along a pipeline. Maybe trying to use AI for that. Have you seen a little bit of that?
Yeah, I think it's coming, Tim. I think it's a really obvious application when we talk about that repetition. Again, empowering people. There'll always be a need for the QC, but I think a lot of it can be identified visually, and then that process speeds up. And again, it goes back to kind of that economic value to the customer and what we can do to make sure that the value is being added in the right places, and the repetitive tasks are being done as efficiently as possible.
I think one of the challenges with those anomaly identification video screening applications that people have been trying with AI for some time now, though, is getting the level of reliability up so that you trust the results.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you end up having to do it manually again. So
Correct.
You've got to somehow get it to a certain level of confidence.
I agree. It's a first pass for me at the moment. The technology, I think, if you can do 70% of the laborious work automatically, you're still going to have to QC. There's going to be a level of trust that you're going to have to build into it. And I think the technology has got to a certain point where you are confident on the reliability of it. I think that you're right. I think it will do the first pass, and then you're going to have to review it from there. But I think that's a really good step in the right direction.
Yeah. Okay.
And the predictive element as well. I think there's a big piece of it where it can learn and be predictive in what we're doing.
Yeah.
We can take it a step further.
Yeah.
That it almost leads us to conclusions.
Yeah, and I think you've got to consider the laborious tasks from a human input, sitting there doing something laborious. Your focus is going to, it's going to drift as well.
Right,
so the AI is not going to be perfect, but then neither is the human either.
Yeah,
so
I
from
think
that point
some
of
of
view,
the early work demonstrated that.
Yeah.
Even before sort of the newer AI models we've got, when people were using basic machine learning processes,
yeah,
it was still coming out with slightly better than the human would when you're looking at 3 hours or 4 hours of ROV footage.
Yeah.
The number of missed anomalies
Yeah.
is actually potentially not that different anymore.
Yeah,
So,
I do totally agree.
yeah.
Sorry, Tim. I think there's a differentiator as well. We're looking at sort of sandbox and how AI can look at a certain set of our information. So it's not kind of quite ChatGPT where you ask it for survey procedures. It's our footprint still on what we're asking AI to do.
Yeah, I think when you take an AI model, you generally have to train it on, as you say, a specific data source, and often you will train it for looking at a particular type of pipeline. So maybe a coated pipeline, and then you'll have to retrain it for a flexible seabed pipeline, and then retrain it again for a power cable, maybe for a wind farm. So you don't have to have an all-encompassing model that's able to deal with everything on a seabed.
Yeah.
Yes, a human could do that, but
and it's the word trust that you use. It's moving the narrative to trust in AI. And when you look at your own work and your own procedures, I think that's when the trust builds, and we can start to really lean into the capabilities of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the large language models are around now, and I think they're getting more and more reliable. I think that the image and the video recognition that you referred to there, Tim, I think that's a technology that's always going to be subjective. You're going to look at something, you're going to understand and interpret it one way as a human, and how do you train an AI to...
Yeah, it's not so black and white.
Correct.
The footage that we get from ROVs is generally not very good. You've got suspended particles in the water, the camera's moving. So it's not. Is it black or white?
It's not a word. It's not text. It's not, as you say, black and white. It is
even the human's got a bit, and normally you'd pull over your colleague or your supervisor and say, "What do you think that is?" or "What does that look like?" So you're already having two opinions. Potentially on
I agree, and I think that's the challenge.
So I think we're just setting a realistic expectation for AI. It's not going to be this sort of fix potentially.
It's not going to be the silver bullet.
That's it. Yeah. Another area of that repetitive task avoidance piece for AI is on the processing that we do when we're doing seabed surveys. We're doing these large area seabed surveys for permitting and construction support, for example, where we've got gigabytes of data that we're pulling from our sensors. And I guess right now we have to go through and sift that through, and there's some automation of that. But do you think there's an application of AI there as well, to avoid having to process kilometres of data?
Yeah, certainly, I think it must play a role in the management of the data, like you mentioned, huge data sets, and taking it a step further to take a first pass at what that data looks like, remove any obvious anomalies, and then it's then at a level and a standard and a quality that when we go in and look at the data, we're already have set that sort of the bar and the
first
foundation.
bar, that basic
Exactly, it's already higher.
QC check has been done.
Yeah.
And even looking for basic missing sets of data. For example, if you're trying to get a square kilometre of data, you could very quickly sense check whether there's an area that's missing or the quality has suddenly dropped in that area.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the sensor channels is missing or something like that. So you could do all that first pass process.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Tim. I think an obvious application is for infill planning. So when you look at your multi-beam data set, AI should very quickly tell you where the infills need to be. Then probably the line planning for doing those infills when you're offshore, which one's the closest to where I am now, which one ties in with our sound velocity probe, so we don't need to do so many ways that could be streamlined.
Yeah, agreed. And simple applications. I think that's what I like about that approach. I think, the coverage that you mentioned there, Chris, I think, don't try to make AI all things to everybody. I think if you try and keep it simple from the beginning, I think you'll get far better results, which I think will really streamline the process from that point of view.
Okay. And then another area which a few suppliers of some of the unmanned underwater vehicles have been looking at is in terms of like navigation and anomaly identification on the fly as well. I don't know if you've seen those, and I don't know how advanced they've got yet. But I think that's coming, isn't it?
It's coming.
Removing the need for an operator of a vehicle.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
I think navigation, and let's talk about collision avoidance, just for example.
Yeah.
I think, that technology is around right now. You're going to bump into something, there's an object in front of you, it can obviously see that and obviously take the right action. I think then you're right, you're moving it to the next stage to say, right, I'm looking at an anomalous event. Is it a scour? Is it some coating problems, for example, on a jacket leg? And can the technology differentiate that? I think I've seen on topside applications the use of AI for categorization of corrosion, for example. And I think that obviously in an air environment, obviously the data's cleaner to start with in the subsea environment. So I guess that's
better visibility. Your cameras are going to be better quality.
Straight away. Yeah. But I think at the end of the day, it's supposed to be yellow, and it's obviously not yellow. Then that's the start, isn't it? From that point of view, I guess. But that's it. If you're looking at hours of video and you can pick out the problem areas that the AI has said, I think there may be a problem here or here or here. At least that 3-hour video, you could look at 5-second clips, and there might be 25-second clips. So that's a far more efficient way of going through your review process than going around that.
So in all of these applications we've talked about so far, I guess the key is the data that you're training the AI on, or you're using the AI on in a live environment. So any thoughts about what we've got to do with that? Because if we haven't got that right, it's not going to be right, is it? It's not going to be correct.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is key. You can't put machine learning over information that isn't structured, that isn't available. And I think as an industry, we deliver a lot of things in silos. I think information is packaged away and stored away, and is not cloud accessible, let's call it, from that point of view. And I think some of the data that we deal with as an industry, it is big, it is complex, but there are ways now of managing that, making it more available so that then the technology can be then empowered to run over that and make more informed decisions. So I think on the step of the journey that we're going on with AI, I think that the industry needs to recognise probably more standardisation, more common approaches, and the management and delivery of that data.
Common data models, common way of storing similar data potentially across different suppliers, different projects. So, it's all in a standardised way. Semantic model, I think, is the term there.
I think so. And that's a huge industry challenge.
And when should we be thinking about that? When we're doing the work early on, when should a client or a supplier be thinking about that data management piece?
I think it should be threaded in from the beginning. I think there should be visibility on that. I think the way that we work at the moment, we generate lots of reports, and the approaches that we take, I think there are smarter ways of doing it. I think, for me personally, the digital delivery of information and technology, I think, is can be improved. I think the way that we're doing things now is the way that we've always done things.
And that's how do we do that at the moment? What does that look like in practice for a survey or an inspection?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be a need for the reporting. It's always going to be a checklist, but for us personally, and I think the direction that we're looking at is ways of providing digital visualizations that are almost surmising what we're doing, but empowering people to actually look at information that they wouldn't normally be able to see. So, you can look at videos, you can look at photos, but then if you're looking at the multi-beam data that we're acquiring, for example, you're now into the realms of specialist software that's going to be required to view that. And then you're saying, well, what did I do in year one, and how does that compare to year two? Let's just use Scour as a classic example. Subsea, you want to know what the difference is and the change in the seabed. Now, how are you going to do that? You're going to have to find that data. That data is inevitably going to be on a hard drive tucked away somewhere. So I think making that information more available is then just going to allow people to make more informed decisions. But the technology that supports that has to be accessible. It has to be an accessible technology that everyone has available to them.
And if we're going to embed AI in there and maybe add AI to that visualization program you're describing, the data needs to be there as well. So get that right, that foundation right in terms of data management. Everything in a cloud, same place where possible.
Yeah.
Then suddenly you can do a lot more with it.
A lot more applications. More applications.
And I think with the increase in the sensor resolutions, the lower cost sensor, we're acquiring more and more data. So we've got two challenges. We want to get it accessible.
Yeah.
But we're also producing more of it all the time.
We are, and I think the challenge is if people don't know the data's there, that I come across this all the time. How many times are we resurveying something that we've already surveyed because we just didn't know the data was available, or we've surveyed it, and you're right, technology is so good now that the application that you maybe originally surveyed that piece of equipment for is now applicable to a completely different thing that you didn't have visibility of at the time. And again, if you can revisit that data readily, easily, then I think, again, there's a lot of efficiencies to be driven through that.
And it feels like early engagement. There's a piece about awareness, and it's you may not realize how much data you're going to collect on day one of a campaign, and then you get into terabytes and petabytes, and it becomes huge, and then it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Or a challenge that we're then called upon to try and overcome. But actually, I think what we're trying to do is talk about data first. And kind of explain how it needs to be managed from day one all the way through to the end of life.
Yeah, so talk about end application. What do you want to do this in
Exactly.
5 years, 10 years' time?
Exactly.
How might you hand it over?
Yeah.
Think about that before you start collecting it.
Yeah.
And then you've got it all in the right place, and then you can overlay the AI applications as they get developed. Because what we're doing now will be different in 5 years' time. Everything we're doing now in AI is going to be probably obsolete.
Completely.
Very low tech.
Yeah.
5 years' time, something completely different. So we have to plan for that now, that this obsolescence is going to happen very quickly.
There's an awful lot. It feels still like that we don't know about AI and the capabilities. Right? Yeah. I think everyone's on a learning curve, and we try and adopt as much as we can in our everyday to make things more efficient. But like you say, Tim, 5 years from now, who knows?
Yeah, what we're going to have.
Yeah.
And the things we thought we were doing now that look really interesting and cool are probably going to look very archaic.
Yeah.
Isn't that
Very much so, yeah.
You go back in computing, it's a pretty standard approach.
Yeah, the technology is moving so quickly.
Very good. So shall we just wrap up then a little bit and summarise what we've discussed and your final thoughts, guys? Chris?
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. It's been a really interesting conversation. It's been great. It's a very thought-provoking topic, I think. And some things that have stuck with me: empowerment of people offshore, trust in AI. I think that's where we have to kind of focus our attention now that we have the abilities to manage data, like you say, Greg. And I think our need for people offshore around the world, that won't change. We are doing more and more remotely, and that's a huge part of the business as we move forward and grow. And with that comes, the AI and how we can, maximise our time and the value that we bring to projects.
Yeah, agree, Chris. The technology is coming. It will be used in our industry. I think that we just need to be wary. We need to take the right steps. I think we use the silver bullet analogy. I think it is going to be something that's going to be very helpful in our day-to-day lives, as you say, Chris, to help support all our staff and we just need to adopt it, be mindful of how it can work for us positively and maybe how it can not work for us positively, and just be mindful of that, apply it to the right applications, and I think that everyone will benefit.
Yeah. And for me, I think similar to you, Greg, I think looking at very small applications to start with, little easy, quick wins, just save a few % here in terms of processing time, and then all those things will come together over the years. And we might want to wait a year, and then suddenly there's a new language model available or some other technology, and suddenly what we think we might take us ages to do in AI now will be really quick, and somebody's answered a call in a year's time. So not try and rush everything right now.
Great.
So for me, just take it one step at a time.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, agreed.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's good.
Thanks for listening to Acteon Energy podcast. To learn more about how we are applying our data, engineering and operational expertise from seabed to surface, visit acteon.com. Don't forget to follow, rate and share. Until next time.